The movie starts by showing prisoners working to break rocks in a state mine. Surprisingly, even Rambo is among them. He's serving time for wrecking Hope's village as a way to get back at Will from the first movie. Soon after, a guard calls Rambo over to meet someone. Turns out, it's Colonel Trotman. He's sorry for not visiting Rambo for nearly 3 years. Trotman asks Rambo for help on a secret mission to Vietnam. At first, Rambo declines due to his Vietnam-related trauma. But Trotman explains that if Rambo pulls off this mission, he might be pardoned by the US president and set free from jail. Rambo remembers he still has 5 years left on his sentence, so he agrees. This time, Rambo's mission is quite honorable, rescuing prisoners of war. With Rambo on board, Trotman rushes to get the paperwork to release Rambo from prison. Cutting to the chase, Rambo gets picked up by a helicopter and taken to the United States headquarters in Thailand. When he gets there, he's warmly welcomed by one of the mercenaries named Eric. But Rambo doesn't pay much attention to Eric and heads straight to meet Trotman. Trotman introduces Rambo to a guy named Murdoch, who's leading this mission. After some introductions, Murdoch invites Rambo to his room. He checks out Rambo's military record and is super surprised to see all the awards he received. That's when Murdoch gives the green light for Rambo to take on the mission. Murdoch explains that Rambo's task is to just take photos of the prisoner camp without getting into fights with the Vietnamese military. At first, Rambo was taken aback by the order, but with no other option, he agreed eventually. Murdoch gave him an hour to get ready. Before he left, Trotman invited Rambo to check out the high-tech stuff at the headquarters. Rambo was pretty amazed by how much things had advanced. Murdoch, with a bit of arrogance, assured Rambo that he'd be safe with the cutting-edge equipment and weapons at the base. Rambo casually cut in, saying that the most powerful weapons are the human mind and brain. This threw Murdoch off a bit, thinking maybe Rambo was a little touched by the war. Trotman chimed in, saying there's no need to worry, as Rambo is his best former soldier. He mentioned Rambo's fearless attitude and resistance to pain. Cutting to the chase, it was time for Rambo to go. He gathered all the gear he needed, like knives, weapons, and cameras for snapping shots of enemy camps. Once he was all set, he and Trotman headed to the plane. As Rambo took off, Murdoch expressed his uncertainty about Rambo's success in rescuing the prisoners. On the plane, Rambo looked nervous about returning to Vietnam. All his buddies had perished there, and it was clearly on his mind. Not long after, the folks at the base informed Rambo that the plane was on its way, so he needed to be ready to jump. Hearing this, Rambo quickly geared up and hopped onto the plane. Unexpectedly, his gear got caught up, causing him to crash and get tangled in the trees. Upon hearing the news, Murdoch ordered Eric to call off the mission entirely. However, Rambo acted recklessly, tossing aside his gear and cutting the rope with his knife. The next day, he, miraculously surviving the ordeal, dashed through the forest, guided by a compass. Thankfully, his experience as a Vietnam War veteran meant he knew his way around the woods. On his journey, Rambo accidentally spotted a suspicious figure. Stealthily, he managed to ambush the person, only to discover it was a woman named Nguyen Sarah. Nguyen Sarah quickly cleared up that she's actually Rambo's contact for this mission and not an enemy. Rambo trusted her words and invited her to continue the journey together. While they walked, Sarah asked Rambo why he was delayed. Rambo explained that he ran into some trouble on the plane. As they moved forward, Sarah suggested they take a waterway instead of the land route, as the latter was no longer safe. When they reached a river, Rambo was taken aback to find that Sarah had arranged for a pirate ship to outwit the Vietnamese army. They paid the pirate captain and set off towards the prisoner camp. However, Rambo remained concerned about Vietnamese patrol boats. The pirate leader showed his bazooka, ready to fight them off if they got discovered. Rambo and Nguyen Sarah took the time to chat and learn more about each other. Rambo was curious about how Sarah ended up involved in such a perilous mission. Sarah explained that her dad used to work in the intelligence service, but he was killed. She stepped in to take his place after his death. Meanwhile, Rambo shared that he's prepared to be a sacrificial pawn, meaning if he doesn't make it, there won't be any search effort for him. Back at the headquarters, Trotman inquired about arranging to bring Rambo back. Surprisingly, Murdoch declined, uncertain of Rambo's survival. Murdoch's doubt stemmed from the fact that they hadn't received any updates from Rambo. However, Trotman persisted, and eventually, Murdoch included Trotman in the team assigned to pick up Rambo. After a considerable time journeying down the river, they eventually reached their destination. Sarah instructed the pirates to wait for them there. Rambo and Sarah retraced their steps through the forest and finally arrived at the Vietnamese military prisoner camp. At first, Rambo thought the camp was deserted, prompting him to investigate more closely. When they approached the camp's entrance, they soon realized that it wasn't abandoned. Before long, a prostitute emerged, someone who had been ordered by the Vietnamese army. Rambo's immediate concern was to confirm if the American prisoners of war were present. To do so, he swiftly assembled a makeshift arrow to gather more information. Realizing this, Sarah firmly told Rambo to stick to his job, which was to photograph the camp. Rambo, however, brushed off her words, stating that he cared more about saving the captives than following orders. Without hesitation, he cut through the camp's fence and stealthily entered to search for the prisoners of war. He instructed Sarah to wait outside. Using his skill and experience, Rambo displayed impressive stealth, eluding the soldiers in the camp. He also counted the number of Vietnamese soldiers guarding the area. After a thorough exploration, Rambo eventually located a prison containing American prisoners of war. Carefully, he approached to free them. However, upon realizing that the prisoners were in dire condition, he decided to focus on saving one prisoner who was tied up outside the prison jack. Escaping together proved challenging due to the ongoing patrols by the guards. With knives and arrows, Rambo managed to incapacitate the guards in complete silence. Meanwhile, Sarah was apprehended by a guard and faced the threat of execution. Just in the nick of time, Rambo arrived and saved her from that dire fate. The following morning, one of the guards' bodies was discovered by his fellow soldiers. In response, the Vietnamese soldiers sounded an alarm, indicating an intruder. Without wasting any time, they scattered to search for Rambo. Simultaneously, Trotman and Eric were getting ready to rendezvous with Rambo at a prearranged location. Rambo, Sarah, and Jack continued their escape, desperately evading pursuit. Soon, they reached the pirate ship and hurriedly embarked, seeking to put distance between them and danger. Meanwhile, the Vietnamese troops persisted in their pursuit, determined to capture Rambo and the others. A lieutenant named Thai spotted footprints in the mud, prompting him to lead his troops in pursuit. They eventually caught sight of Rambo attempting to flee by boat. The Thai lieutenant swiftly communicated with headquarters, requesting reinforcements to intensify the hunt for Rambo. However, while on the ship, Rambo faced an unexpected threat. A Vietnamese battleship appeared on the horizon. Shockingly, they realized they had fallen into a trap set by the pirates. The pirate captain reacted angrily, slapping both Rambo and Sarah for falling into his trap. Surprisingly, Rambo managed to grab a knife and fought back, successfully taking down the pirates. Afterward, he instructed Sarah and Jack to swim to the mainland immediately, as he intended to confront the Vietnamese warship. However, as Rambo engaged in the fight, he found himself under heavy fire from the enemy ships, becoming trapped. Fortunately, he recalled the presence of a bazooka on the ship. Swiftly, he retrieved the bazooka and aimed it at the enemy ship, causing a massive explosion. As Rambo prepared to make his escape by jumping into the water, he was suddenly ambushed by one of the pirates who had been hiding on the ship's roof since the beginning. This situation caused panic for Sarah, knowing that the Vietnamese warship defeated by Rambo might collide with the pirate ship. Fortunately, Rambo managed to seize the knife and fend off the attacker, then swiftly leaped from the ship just before it exploded. Witnessing Rambo's survival, Sarah and Jack were visibly relieved and joyful. Rambo urged them to keep moving, as Lieutenant Thai's troops were still in pursuit. As they neared the designated pickup point, Rambo made the decision to part ways with Sarah. Before departing, Sarah assured Rambo that his actions were not in vain. On the other side, Trotman was set to arrive at the pickup location in 3 minutes, while Rambo and Jack continued to evade their pursuers through the rice fields, doing their best to stay concealed. Unexpectedly, Lieutenant Tai had positioned himself on a hillside and ordered his troops to launch mortar rounds at Rambo and Jack. Despite the intense assault, both Rambo and Jack pressed on, determined to keep running. Soon after, Trotman arrived and was pleasantly surprised to find that Rambo had successfully rescued at least one captive. This unexpected success astonished both Trotman and Eric. Trotman quickly instructed Eric to assist Rambo by utilizing heavy weaponry from the helicopter. Eric's efforts led to the incapacitation of numerous Vietnamese troops, allowing Rambo to seize the opportunity and ascend the hill. Delighted by Rambo's achievement, Trotman reported the good news back to headquarters. However, when Murdoch learned of this accomplishment, his reaction was far from joyful. In fact, he cleared the room of everyone present. In a surprising turn of events, Murdoch issued a controversial order, instructing Eric to abort the mission of picking up Rambo. Trotman, upon hearing this, was both incredibly surprised and infuriated, as Rambo and Jack were directly beneath their helicopter. Just as Trotman was about to lower the stairs for their rescue, Eric unexpectedly intervened by initiating a prayer, leaving Trotman powerless. Overcome by anger, Trotman directed a strong expletive towards them. Under Murdoch's orders, they were reluctantly forced to leave Rambo and Jack behind. Witnessing this abandonment, Vietnamese soldiers swiftly closed in on Rambo and Jack, armed to the teeth. Eventually, Rambo gave in and dropped his weapon. From a distance, Sarah, who hadn't departed, continued to observe the situation, keenly aware that Rambo appeared to be intentionally abandoned. Upon their return to headquarters, a furious Trotman wasted no time in rebuking Murdoch for his irrational and unjust orders. Murdoch tried to justify himself by claiming that he had instructed Rambo to leave because Rambo hadn't followed his orders. According to Murdoch, Rambo was only meant to photograph the seemingly empty camp, and it wasn't his responsibility to rescue the prisoners of war. Murdoch went on to explain that if the public found out about this incident, it could lead to substantial financial repercussions for the state, as they might have to compensate Vietnam for the damage caused during the previous war. Hearing Murdoch's reasoning, Trotman felt deeply disappointed. He knew that these prisoners had been willing to sacrifice their lives to protect their country, yet they were treated as expendable and abandoned. Unfortunately, Murdoch remained indifferent and dismissed Trotman's concerns, even going so far as to kick him out of his room. As Trotman left, he reminded Murdoch that this decision was a grave error, as it would surely lead to conflict with Rambo. Back in Vietnam, Rambo found himself bound and submerged in a pool of pig excrement. Soon after, a Russian army unit arrived via helicopter. Surprisingly, Vietnam and Russia were allies. This Russian force was led by Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky Yukovsky. Using a knife, Yukovsky attempted to intimidate Rambo, but he soon realized that Rambo wasn't easily frightened. Yukovsky then instructed the Vietnamese soldiers to clean up Rambo, as he intended to interrogate him in a separate room. After some time, Rambo was confined to a room. Yukovsky informed him that he could extract valuable information through Rambo, threatening torture if he didn't comply. However, Rambo remained silent, prompting Yukovsky to pressure him further. Yukovsky forced Rambo to contact headquarters and admit that he had been apprehended for unauthorized espionage. Despite Yukovsky's anger and orders, Rambo continued to defy his command. In response, Yukovsky instructed his subordinate, Yusin, to torture Rambo. Meanwhile, Sarah appeared in disguise as a prostitute, aiming to rescue Rambo. Yukovsky and Yusin persisted in electrocuting Rambo in an attempt to break his resolve. However, Rambo remained steadfast, refusing to betray his country. Unexpectedly, Yukovsky intercepted a conversation that Rambo had during his capture, revealing that he had been intentionally abandoned due to Murdoch's orders. Yukovsky explained that Rambo had been left behind on direct orders from mission leader Murdoch. Despite this revelation, Rambo continued to stand his ground and refused to talk. Yukovsky then instructed Yusin to administer a high-voltage shock, causing the lights in the room to flicker. Despite the intense torture, Rambo's resilience amazed Yukovsky. Meanwhile, Sarah managed to eliminate one guard, seize Rambo's weapons and bow, and embarked on a mission to locate Rambo's whereabouts within the facility. Meanwhile, Yukovsky instructed Lieutenant Tide to bring Jack, the prisoner taken by Rambo earlier. Yukovsky then resorted to threats, claiming he would harm Jack's eye with a heated knife if Rambo refused to talk. Jack, however, urged Rambo not to give in, even if it meant his own death. They were both willing to make such sacrifices for their country. Despite Jack's determination, Rambo couldn't bear to see his friend tortured further. Ultimately, Rambo relented and agreed to contact headquarters. Simultaneously, Sarah managed to locate Rambo's captivity and covertly positioned herself beneath the floor of the room. Initially, Rambo was unaware of her presence, but he soon noticed her beneath him. Nonetheless, he proceeded to make contact with headquarters using a predetermined code. Upon establishing the connection, headquarters personnel inquired about Rambo's location. Filled with emotion, Rambo shifted his focus and directed his words at Murdoch, threatening to seek revenge against him. After making his threat, Rambo, aided by Sarah, launched a daring escape attempt from the facility. The sounds of gunfire caught the attention of both Vietnamese and Russian troops, prompting them to rush towards the source of the commotion. Rambo and Sarah engaged in combat, taking down the enemies in their path. However, they soon realized the overwhelming number of adversaries present in the camp. To create a diversion, they threw grenades and forcefully tore through the wire fence with their bare hands. Despite breaking free from the camp, their escape wasn't guaranteed. Hundreds of Vietnamese and Russian soldiers joined forces, sweeping through the forest armed to the teeth. As the search dragged on without finding Rambo, they eventually deployed a helicopter with powerful lights to score the area. Ultimately, the helicopter located Rambo and Sarah, firing missiles at them. Swift and agile, they continued to run, evading the missile strikes and doing everything they could to stay out of harm's way. After an entire night of fruitless pursuit, the combined Vietnamese and Russian soldiers decided to retreat back to their camp, realizing their efforts were in vain. Witnessing this, Sarah felt a sense of relief and immediately tended to Rambo's injured hand. While Murdoch's unease persisted, having been directly threatened by Rambo. Shortly thereafter, Trotman arrived and once again appealed to Murdoch to send a team for Rambo's extraction. However, Murdoch staunchly refused once more, leading to a tense exchange. Trotman became emotional and even contemplated going to retrieve Rambo by himself. However, his intentions were met with resistance and confrontation from Eric and other mercenaries, acting on Murdoch's orders to prevent Trotman from going on a rescue mission alone. In the meantime, Rambo was deeply moved by Nguyen Sara's willingness to risk everything to save him. He could sense that Nguyen Sara had developed feelings for him as well. She expressed her desire to escape Vietnam with him and start a life together in America. Nguyen Sara pledged her unwavering commitment to stand by Rambo through all the years. Rambo reciprocated her feelings and embraced her, leading to a heartfelt kiss. Afterward, they began to make their departure plans. However, tragedy struck when Nguyen Sara was tragically shot by Lieutenant Tai's forces just as she stepped forward. This loss triggered a frenzy of rage in Rambo, who launched a brutal assault on the troops responsible for her death. Witnessing the carnage, the cowardly Lieutenant Tai fled from Rambo's wrath. Overwhelmed with sorrow, Rambo held Nguyen Sara in his arms as she passed away. In her final moments, she implored Rambo not to forget her.
No.
After giving Nguyen Sara a proper burial, Rambo resolved not to be consumed by grief. He geared up for a vengeful mission against both the Vietnamese and Russian troops responsible for the pain he had endured. Rambo proceeded to incapacitate his foes using his bare hands and a knife, leaving them immobilized. He also utilized his bow and arrows to silently eliminate enemies without making a sound. This left the Russian and Vietnamese soldiers baffled, as their comrades vanished without a trace, and they couldn't locate Rambo's presence. Rambo continued to showcase his unparalleled skills, dispatching enemies with remarkable precision. Purposefully, he made himself visible to draw the enemy's attention, leading them into a trap. Swiftly, he entered a small village, with Vietnamese and Russian soldiers in pursuit, following his calculated plan. As he reached the edge of the village, Rambo stole a chicken and a container of kerosene from the villagers. With his loot in hand, he sprinted into a dense sugarcane field, causing the pursuing troops to fan out and encircle him from various directions. After an extensive search in the garden, the soldiers stumbled upon a bloodstain and trailed it, convinced that it was Rambo's blood. However, when they reached the center of the garden, their surprise was evident. There, they discovered the remains of chickens and used gasoline canisters. It became clear that the blood they'd found was from the chickens, not Rambo. On the other hand, Rambo observed that the enemy had fallen into his trap. Seizing the opportunity, he initiated a fire and swiftly climbed a tree. From this vantage point, he unleashed a barrage of arrows armed with incendiary devices onto the enemy. Rambo continued his relentless assault from within the sugarcane plantation, forcing the enemy to perish in the flames. The fire continued to spread rapidly, as Rambo had previously soaked the area with oil. In addition to that, he employed his arrows to detonate enemy vehicles. With the inferno raging around him, Rambo pressed on towards the waterfall, only to encounter Lieutenant Tai once again. Swiftly and mercilessly, Thai Lieutenant shot Rambo multiple times. When his bullets ran out, he switched to a handgun and continued firing at Rambo. During this intense confrontation, Rambo's memories of Lieutenant Tai's role in Nguyen Sara's death resurfaced. Gritting his teeth, Rambo emerged from his hiding spot, readying his arrows for combat. Fortunately, Thai Lieutenant's shots missed their mark, giving Rambo an opportunity to take aim. In a climactic showdown, Rambo managed to retaliate and wound the Thai Lieutenant, who attempted to flee from Rambo's wrath, overwhelmed by the fury in Rambo's eyes. Before long, Yusin emerged in a helicopter, carrying a bomb with him. Reacting swiftly, Rambo evaded the impending explosion by sprinting away. His quick reflexes allowed him to jump into the water just in time to avoid the blast. Realizing that Rambo survived, Yusin ordered his men to open fire on him. Using his exceptional combat skills, Rambo turned the tables on his attackers, ambushing them and eventually taking control of the helicopter by force. However, before he could free the prisoners, Rambo faced the formidable task of confronting Yusin. A physical altercation ensued, and initially, Rambo found himself at a disadvantage due to Yusin's larger size. Yet Rambo's resourcefulness prevailed, and he managed to overcome Yusin, even expelling the helicopter pilot from the aircraft. With sheer determination, Rambo wrested control of the helicopter and promptly changed course to rescue the prisoners held captive in the Vietnamese army camp. Upon arriving at the camp, Rambo wasted no time and launched a missile assault on the area. The element of surprise caught the Vietnamese and Russian soldiers off guard, leaving them ill-prepared to defend against the onslaught of Rambo's helicopter. The prisoners witnessing this astonishing turn of events were in disbelief that Rambo had returned to their rescue. Rambo's helicopter effortlessly decimated the enemy troops, leaving them with little chance to retaliate. With the situation under control, Rambo descended to the ground to free the captives, eliminating any remaining foes. Once all the captives were liberated, Rambo took charge, guiding them and protecting their rear as they made their way to safety. The captives were visibly relieved, knowing they would soon be reunited with their loved ones. However, a new threat emerged as a Russian helicopter gunship, piloted by Yukovsky, appeared unexpectedly from behind. Frustrated and enraged, Yukovsky continued his assault on Rambo's helicopter, firing missiles relentlessly. Rambo, at the controls, was left with little choice but to evade the incoming attacks rather than launch a counteroffensive. As they approached a small village, the liberated prisoners attempted to resist, managing to incapacitate one of Yukovsky's men. Witnessing this, Yukovsky grew even angrier and retaliated by unleashing fire on Rambo's helicopter, causing it to emit smoke. While Yukovsky prepared for a final decisive attack, the unexpected occurred. Rambo's helicopter vanished, leaving Yukovsky bewildered and searching for his target. After a period of intense searching, Yukovsky eventually located Rambo's stranded helicopter above the river, realizing that his relentless pursuit had forced Rambo into a precarious position. Closing in on the Yukovsky's helicopter, Rambo took quick action, utilizing a bazooka to destroy Yukovsky's aircraft before it could carry out its destructive intentions. With that threat eliminated, Rambo continued his mission, piloting the damaged helicopter towards the United States headquarters in Thailand. Despite the extensive damage, Rambo skillfully managed to navigate the helicopter to its destination. As the moment drew near, Rambo contacted the headquarters to alert them about the incoming emergency situation, as he had successfully rescued numerous prisoners of war. This news brought relief and joy to those who heard it, although Murdoch's reaction remained notably different. Murdoch's panic and fear were evident as he remembered the earlier threats from Rambo. As Rambo's helicopter landed, he wasted no time and armed himself with a heavy weapon, heading straight for Murdoch. Along the way, he confronted Eric and gave him a sound beating. Meanwhile, medical personnel attended to the rescued prisoners of war, providing much-needed care. Upon reaching the base, Rambo systematically destroyed all the sophisticated equipment, intensifying Murdoch's fear. With everything wrecked, Rambo stormed into Murdoch's room. A tense standoff unfolded as Rambo glared at Murdoch while brandishing a knife. Murdoch attempted to explain himself, but Rambo choked him and held the knife dangerously close. Threatening Murdoch, Rambo demanded action, finding and saving the remaining captives, or Murdoch's life would be forfeit. With his message delivered, Rambo left the room. Outside Murdoch's headquarters, Trotman crossed paths with Rambo and shared the news that Rambo would be honored with a second Medal of Honor. Yet Rambo declined the recognition, suggesting that the medal be awarded exclusively to the prisoners of war he had saved. In response, Trotman acknowledged Rambo's decision and revealed that Rambo had finally earned his freedom. However, Trotman also tried to persuade Rambo to reconsider rejoining the United States military. He highlighted the value of Rambo's skills and experience for his country. Despite Trotman's plea, Rambo stood firm in his refusal. He explained that he no longer had any motivation to return to the military, as he had lost all his comrades during the course of his missions. In the final moments of the story, Trotman inquired about Rambo's desires and aspirations. In a heartfelt response, Rambo expressed his longing for a reciprocal relationship between the country and its soldiers, where the nation would show genuine care and appreciation for the sacrifices made by its soldiers, just as soldiers deeply cared for their homeland. With that, Rambo chose to move forward in his life, seeking a path beyond the military. And so, the story came to a close.